Campside Media.
Hey, Campside listeners, welcome to Inside the Tent, our series where we go behind the mic of our hit podcasts. I'm Anthony Pacillo, and I work on the film and TV side of Campside, helping to turn our series into screen adaptations. Today we're talking with Campside co-founder Vanessa Grigoriadis about her new series Model Wars, which I have to say is just signature Vanessa. It's as glamorous and gritty as ever, and it's ripe for screen adaptation. This series takes us inside the world of the modeling agency wars of the 80s and 90s, and specifically inside the life of a scrappy upstart modeling agent turned industry conqueror, the legendary Horatio Alger of the modeling wars, none other than Paul Fisher. If you want more behind-the-mic content like this, head to joincampside.com to become a free member of the Campside community. That's joincampside.com. Now here's my conversation with Vanessa. Hey, Vanessa, welcome.
Hey, Anthony. So nice to be here.
We are inside the tent. We've got our piles of cocaine ready to go.
Some guns in the corner.
Just a couple of guns.
Statues that we might knock the head off of once in a while. These are all things that happen in Model Wars, obviously.
That's right.
Not in a workaday office, not a podcasting office.
That's right. Not ours, anyway.
You don't hear a lot about drugs in the podcast space, though. You know, I have a feeling that it's just really not great to be on the mic on pretty much any kind of drug. Maybe Adderall is good for the editing, though, and for some degree of research, maybe, or really tedious tasks like, you know, Excel sheets and stuff.
Maybe we're onto something here. Everybody who's talking about the death of the narrative podcasts, all we needed to do was just throw some cocaine into the mix.
That's right.
All right, we figured it out.
Just Charlie Sheen it.
When in doubt. Okay, Model Wars. Let me ask you, how did you discover this story?
So I can't take credit for this because really it came from Rachel Winter, who's an amazing producer of Dallas Buyers Club and a bunch of different movies. And she had, for quite some time, been in touch with this, you know, real character, Paul Fisher, who came out of, you know, the modeling industry in the 80s and 90s in New York and had really wanted to tell his story for a really long time.
Paul Fisher, I have never heard so many rises and falls in a single person's life as with this man. How did you map his story out, given all of those ups and downs?
Well, I would say that, again, credit does not go to me, really goes to Mike Meyer, who was the person who lived with this material and many, many hours of Paul's voice after we had done a ton of recording. You know, the way the team worked, we had Julia Case-Levine, who was doing a lot of the point running with Paul, set up a lot of interviews, did some interviews herself. And then we turned like a big mess of tape over to Mike. And Mike and I, you know, plotted out the first episode or two. But after that, he sort of ran with it, I would say. And he really, first of all, just has an amazing way with story, but really has like a nose for the operatic, you know, stages a man can go through in their lives. And somebody like Paul just like had so many. He just kept messing up and kept having these precipitous falls while still trying to achieve his goal of being the number one model agent in New York City.
And he did it. Do you have any favorite tops of the mountain or favorite bottoms? Any favorite ups, any favorite downs for Paul?
I mean, I would say the favorite down is when he gets a call, I believe it was from Bob Evans, saying that Adnan Khashoggi, the infamous arms dealer, wanted to have Paul bring him some girls, 'cause this was kind of the time in New York when like currency was, oh, I can bring like 10 girls to this party, 10 models to this party. I mean, that means I'm a big shot, right? So all of like the, people who had risen to the top of their industries, whether it was modeling or Hollywood, were kind of in this scene to pick up girls, pick up models, blah, blah, blah. And Paul goes to meet with Khashoggi. He, I believe, brings him a book of all of these different, models that he doesn't really represent, but he's, hoping to represent, or just maybe cutouts from magazines or whatever. And he's like, yeah, you want to meet some of these girls? And Khashoggi's like, yeah, I want to meet these girls. And he picks some of them. And Paul then leaves, and he's like, well, I'm obviously not going to bring like actual models to this guy's house because he wants to have sex with them. I'm going to bring like some sex workers. So he goes and gets, some like streetwalkers, as we used to call them, and cleans them up and brings them to Khashoggi's house and is like, but bang, look, I got you models. So yeah, I think that you could describe that as a low point, although I guess some people would also think that's a high point. Those are the kinds of things that he did. I mean, the great thing about this podcast is that Paul is opening kimono. He's telling you what really went down. And it's so rare, in this world of fakery and everybody like doing a hagiography and the Apple, TV's like supermodels, like, oh my God, we were all friends, like to get the real story of like the big bad 80s.
Was that the case with Paul right out of the gate, or did it take a little time? Yeah.
No. Yeah. He's been working on the story for years. I mean, he is an incredible storyteller because I think he's been like running over them in his mind and perfecting them. And the comic timing is perfect, and they all have like exactly the right like amount of color and dramatic arc and blah, 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 blah. It's really, it was, to me, the easy part of the podcast was getting the stories from Paul. What was more difficult, and what, Mike and then our amazing sound designer, Mark McAdam, really solved was the tone of the show. And then also, I think, I will take credit for solving some of the rational problems that come along with how do you tell a story of somebody who was sort of a villain at this time, in what is a bit of a dicey milieu, because like modeling was pretty dirty, and post Me Too era, you want to be able to tell the story truthfully and you want it to be entertaining, but you also don't want it to be exploitative. And I think that this podcast, I feel, really sort of solves some of those, you could call them political problems, cultural problems, whatever. Like, how do you actually recapture these stories, tell them truthfully, not where every single person is a victim, not where everybody is a villain, where people are like all different shades of gray, and, bad things happen to some people, they don't happen to everybody. Like, how are you going to really portray an era instead of, doing what the culture has done for like the last 5 years, which is basically just say, if you were in fashion, you were probably exploited. If you were in modeling, you were probably exploited. That's not like completely fair to the truth of that time.
No, and I think the voices around Paul helped you tell that story. I mean, I think one of the things that was so winning about Paul, for all of his flaws as well, was the people around him loved him and had an incredible allegiance to him. I mean, Omar talking about Paul, I'm like, I love this man.
Yeah.
I mean,
he had an amazing like band of brothers, right? And the fact that so many people were willing to talk to us about Paul. Of course, he burned some bridges. I mean, it's a pretty rough and tumble business. How would you not, right? But the fact that so many of the people from Paul's past were like, I will do a wide-ranging interview where I will tell you about selling the drugs. I mean, there's an amazing episode where, Omar's like, so we would sell a little weed. And you're like, okay, so it's like drug dealing. He's like, no, I wouldn't call it drug dealing. I mean, we're just like, trying to get by, guys in the city.
You got an incredible amount of people to participate. Are there any characters from this world, from this story, that you'd wish you'd gotten that you couldn't, either because they didn't want to participate or they passed away?
Well, I would say that the supermodels did not necessarily want to participate. I mean, what is amazing about this podcast generally is, the main character is so not the main character, right? Like, the main character is the supermodel, is like the Naomi, the Cindy, the Stephanie Seymour, blah, blah, blah. And Paul is the model agent. Like, he's the guy taking, the crumbs off of the muffin. Like, he's the guy setting up the contracts or whatever, but, he's just taking a percentage or however they did these deals. We've elevated, and that's part of what, like, the comedy of the podcast is about, is like, and he admits it. Like, at the end of the podcast, he says, every model I ever represented has ghosted me. They don't know who I am. They barely remember me. I did it all and they don't remember me. And it's like so amazing, right? And then, of course, we haven't really talked about it, but, one of the great characters who everybody talks about, but you don't meet because he is dead. Although you do hear a bunch of songs that he wrote. And there is the claim that he maybe wrote some of Bob Dylan's songs, is, this alleged mobster from Houston who had set Paul up in New York, who was the person who was like, you can open a modeling agency as long as when I come to New York City, there's like cocaine and a party. As long as that happens, you can have like $1 million to start this agency. And so Larry Lind, R.I.P., one of the great characters of, the seedy underbelly of this industry. That's really why I wanted to do the project to begin with, is I was like, haven't heard that one before. The model agency set up by the mobster, Mm-hmm. But of course. And, then you have also that he's like sort of this lovable mobster, like he's a beatnik who turned into an alleged mobster. And so, we're not in like sex trafficking territory. Hopefully not in sex trafficking territory.
Larry Lind, I could honestly watch an entire series just on Larry Lind himself.
Amazing.
The second that you said, I think it was when Larry realized he was going to lose it all, and he just took the kamikaze plane right to the ground, basically, and started spending it as recklessly and lavishly as he could. I was like, yeah, I'm following this guy right to the ground. He's incredible.
Yeah. What an amazing, amazing life. Yeah. And then he's like, Paul, now it's over. All the money's gone. Sorry. Bye. Fend for yourself, kid.
Right.
And, he does. I mean, it's really having a character that you can't help but root for, even though you're not supposed to, really, is a storyteller gift. It's rare, to find a person like that who has enough self-awareness to be able to tell their story in that way. And that's what makes this podcast so special. Like, really, it is Paul's story. Like, obviously, we dressed it up and we put a bunch of different stuff around it and we interviewed a lot of people, and we made it very much about the war between, different agencies in New York at this time. and about that culture of modeling at that time. But it is essentially like Paul, you know, being truthful. I really wish more people would tell their stories in this way, because I feel like this podcast is a real lesson in, like, if you can own your past and look at it in a relatively clear-eyed manner, you can really have a story that, like, stands the test of time. But if you want to just, like, put out another, I did just watch the Charlie Sheen documentary. Like, if you want to just, like, put out another story about how you're not a drug addict, but you are, you know, I felt almost dirty watching that, because I was like, this is not right. Like, this guy is not really able. He's confessing to a bunch of stuff. I got that. But he's not quite in a place yet where he really has, like, a bird's eye view, you know?
Yeah, no, Paul does not hold a single ounce of his story back.
I mean, and if he does, my God, like, it could be even crazier than what he's told us, you know? I mean, it's cool. I really love this series. I have to say that, you know, Adam Hoff was, of course, the one who took on talking to Paul early on, and Allie Haney, you know, really also talked to Paul a lot early on. It took a while for us to get this off the ground, but I think it really worked.
Worth it. 1,000%. We can wrap up there. I mean, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share about this series or the ugly business of beauty in general?
No, I do love that phrase, though. That comes from Michael Wolff, who wrote this book called Model, you know, The Ugly Business of Beautiful Women. And, no, I would love to read a book like that today about influencers.
Yeah, I wonder who's the Paul Fisher
of
that world. You know, I don't think that person exists anymore, right? Because everybody's straight to camera doing it themselves.
Oh, no, they exist. There have to be managers and people like that.
Is it Paul? You know, is he still? Yeah, what's he doing now? Is he still in the game?
He is doing
right?
some of that. He is doing some of that.
Yeah, I have a feeling after listening to that, I and anybody else listening I'm sure, had the same feeling that he's got a few more chapters left.
That's for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Vanessa. It's an incredible series, as usual.
Thank you. Well, it was wonderful talking to you. Everybody go listen to Model Wars. Yay!
First podcast in the Apple Carousel, folks.
Yep.
Go check it out.
Thanks.
Thanks again to Vanessa and the rest of the Model Wars team, and thank you for listening to Inside the Tent. Don't forget to head over to joincampside.com to become a free member of the Campside community. That's joincampside.com.